Introduction. Imagine a great river flowing through a vast desert. On its banks, more than 5,000 years ago, men and women built giant pyramids, invented writing, and worshipped gods with animal heads. This civilization is called Ancient Egypt. It is the first great civilization of Africa and the world. Today we will discover its secrets and understand why it is so important for us, the children of Africa. Fundamental notions. Ancient Egypt is a civilization that began around 3100 BC, when King Menes united the north and south of the country into one kingdom. It lasted for more than 3,000 years, until the Romans conquered it in 30 BC. That is a very long time. Imagine that your great-great-great-grandparents lived in that era, and their children continued the same way of life. The country was crossed by the Nile, a great river that brought water and fertile soil. Every year the Nile overflowed and deposited a rich black mud called silt. This allowed the Egyptians to grow wheat, barley, vegetables, and flax for making clothes. The Nile was like a highway. Boats carried stones, grain, and people from one end of the country to the other. The Egyptians believed in many gods. The most important was Ra, the sun god, who traveled across the sky in his boat. There was also Osiris, god of the dead, Isis, his wife, and Horus, their son, represented with a falcon's head. The pharaohs, the kings of Egypt, were considered living gods. The most famous is Ramesses II, who reigned for 66 years and built many temples. Egyptian writing is called hieroglyphics. These are small drawings that represent sounds or ideas. For example, an I can mean to see, or the sound IR. Scribes, very learned men, spent years learning to write and read. They used reeds dipped in ink to write on papyrus, a bit like our paper. The pyramids are the most famous monuments of Egypt. The largest, the Great Pyramid of Giza, was built around 2560 BC. It is made of over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing as much as a car. The Egyptians transported them on the Nile and pulled them with ropes. The pyramids were the tombs of the pharaohs. Inside, treasures, furniture, and food were placed for the afterlife. Deeper exploration. Egyptian society was organized like a pyramid. At the top was the pharaoh, all-powerful. Below were the priests and nobles, who helped the pharaoh govern. Then came the scribes, soldiers, artisans, and merchants. At the bottom were the peasants, who worked the land, and slaves. Often prisoners of war. But remember, Egyptians were not all equal, but they believed the order of the world had to be respected. Egyptian women had more rights than in many other ancient civilizations. They could own land, trade, and even become pharaoh. The most famous is Hatshepsut, who reigned in the 15th century BC. She wore a false beard and had herself depicted as a mun to be accepted. Another famous female pharaoh is Cleopatra, who lived much later, in the 1st century BC. The Egyptians were very skilled in mathematics and astronomy. They invented a 365-day calendar, like ours, based on the sun's movement and the Nile floods. They could calculate areas and volumes to build their pyramids and temples. They used fractions, but not like us. They wrote, for example, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, etc. Egyptian medicine was very advanced. Doctors knew how to treat fractures, wounds, and eye diseases. They used plants like garlic, onion, and honey to heal. They even performed brain surgeries. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical book over 3,500 years old, describes more than 700 remedies. The Egyptians believed in life after death. For the soul of the deceased to live forever, the body had to be preserved. That is why they practiced mummification. They removed the organs except the heart, dried the body with salt, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in a sarcophagus. Mummies were placed in tombs with everyday objects, food, jewelry, games, and even small wooden servants called ashabdus to work for the dead. Examples and case studies. Example 1. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 1922, the English archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, who died at age 19. The tomb was filled with gold, jewelry, chariots, and furniture. It was the first time a nearly intact royal tomb was found. It taught us a great deal about the life of pharaohs. Example 2, the Rosetta Stone in 1799, French soldiers found a black stone near Rosetta, Egypt. On it, the same text was written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphics, Demotic, a simplified script, and Greek. Thanks to this stone, a French scholar, Champollion, succeeded in deciphering hieroglyphics in 1822. Example 3, the lighthouse of Alexandria, built around 280 BC on the island of Pharos, near Alexandria. This lighthouse was over 100 meters tall. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It guided ships with a fire at night. It was destroyed by earthquakes in the Middle Ages. Example 4, the Library of Alexandria, founded in the 3rd century BC. This library contained hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. Scholars from around the world came to study mathematics, medicine, and philosophy there. It was destroyed by fire, but it remains a symbol of African knowledge. Example 5, the Temple of Karnak, located near Luxor. This immense temple was dedicated to the god Ammonius Ra. It was built over 2,000 years by several pharaohs. It has columns as tall as 10-story buildings and statues of pharaohs. The walls are covered with hieroglyphics that tell of battles and offerings. Example 6, Egyptian games. Egyptian children played board games like Senet, a bit like our game of Goose. They also had dolls, spinning tops, and leather balls. Adults enjoyed wrestling, hunting, and fishing. Exercises 1. Easy MCQ. Which river flows through Egypt? A. The Nile. B. The Congo. C. The Niger. D. The Zambezi. Answer A. Explanation: the Nile is the great river that flows through Egypt from south to north. Points 1-2. Easy MCQ. What is the name of the Egyptian writing? A. Hieroglyphics. B. Cuneiform. C. The alphabet. D. Letters. Answer A. Explanation: hieroglyphics are drawings that represent sounds or ideas. Points 1-3. Medium MCQ. Who united the north and south of Egypt? A. Ramesses II. B. Menes. C. Tutankhamun. D. Cleopatra. Answer B. Explanation: King Menes unified Egypt around 3100 BC. Points 2-4. Medium MCQ. What was placed in Egyptian tombs? A. Treasures and food. B. Nothing. C. Only flowers. D. Books. Answer A. Explanation: objects were placed for the afterlife. Points 2-5. Hard MCQ. What is the name of the Egyptian sun god? A. Osiris. B. Rac. Horus. D. Isis. Answer B. Explanation: Ra was the sun god, very important. Points 3-6. Hard MCQ. Who deciphered hieroglyphics? A. Howard Carter. B. Champollion. C. Cleopatra. D. Ramesses. Answer B. Explanation: Champollion deciphered hieroglyphics thanks to the Rosetta Stone. Points 3-7. Easy. True/false. The pyramids were the houses of the pharaohs. True/false. False explanation: the pyramids were the tombs of the pharaohs, not their houses. Points 1-8. Medium. True/false. Women could not be pharaoh. True/false. False explanation: Hatshepsut and Cleopatra were female pharaohs. Points 2-9. Hard. True/false. The Egyptian calendar had 365 days. True/false. True explanation: the Egyptians invented a 365-day calendar. Points 3-10. Challenge. True/false. The Egyptians did not know medicine. True/false. False explanation: they performed surgeries and used medicinal plants. Points 4-11. Easy. Short answer: why was the Nile important to the Egyptians? Answer: the Nile provided water for drinking, for irrigating crops, and fertile silt. It also served as a route for boats. Points 2-12. Medium. Short answer: what did scribes do? Answer: scribes wrote and read hieroglyphics. They kept accounts, wrote laws and stories. It was a very respected job. Points 2-13. Hard. Short answer: How did the Egyptians mummify the dead? Answer: they removed the organs, dried the body with salt, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in a sarcophagus. Points: 314. Points: 319. Medium essay: describe a day in the life of an Egyptian child. Answer: he wakes up early, helps his parents in the fields or goes to scribe school. He plays senet and eats bread and vegetables. Points: 420. Challenge essay: imagine you are an archaeologist. What would you do to discover a tomb? Answer: I would look for clues in the sand, dig carefully, note everything I find, and protect the objects. Points: 4.